It's getting dark, Noco. I don't think I can help you much longer. Goodbye, Noco.
You're trying to tell me that I, good old Nightcap, died down here ages ago?
Hey all, Siege here, and today, wow, right? Today we get into the story of the Vallis Undermine, as well as the one surrounding Noco, Nightcap, and what's brewing underneath the Vallis itself. One that is not easy to follow, but if you can see the cluster through the mushrooms, provides quite a few moving parts that will most likely become even more relevant as time passes. I think it's important to understand that the narrative in Warframe overall is changing. And in that, we are beginning to learn of much that was supposed to have been buried forever. Within the confines of the Orb of Vallis, this is no different. The area itself is in a constant state of terraformation due to its extreme weather, and has been occupied by Corpus forces. Nef Anyo, a magnet and one of the Corpus board of directors, has been utilizing this section of Venus for, quite frankly, a myriad of questionable pursuits at this point, all of which seeming to come at the cost of both the worker colony's lives as well as their quality of life. Technology, it would seem, while wondrous, can also be the stuff of nightmares, especially for those poor souls who have come to live, well, have really been forced to live here. Imagine, if you will, dwelling in constant fear of losing everything, and I mean everything, limbs and body parts included.
What? Don't recognize me? It's Thursby! Look what Biz and Noco put together. Top shelf parts. Not just that, Biz gave me enough spare stock to start my own shop. Legs, pets, and parts. That's my new name, Legs. Don't call me Thursby no more. I've got a new body, new store, new hook, new name.
Essentially, living, or perhaps more aptly existing, as indentured servants. For the people of Fortuna specifically, they have entered into a deal with the Corpus, and in this instance, with the aforementioned Nef Anyo, for living accommodations under the pretense of completing work within the Orb of Vallis. See, the idea behind the Corpus, one founded by Parvos Granum, was to not cast its members. In fact, all who found familiarity in its founding virtues were welcome. These concepts stemming from a voice in his head that these days appears more and more to have a cosmic influence, and not just in the sense of the collective unconscious, although that framing wouldn't be entirely inaccurate. Regardless where these ideals came from, the concept Granum had envisioned for his people was essentially taking the wealth he had sacrificed so much of himself to acquire. Firstly, in losing his hand, taken by the Orokin for stealing a chunk of highly valuable rubido, but also in enduring a brutal escape, swallowing that rock, crawling back to his own incredibly modest home to somehow recover, and with his newfound capital, make deals with others.
My gift to the future is an idea that wealth need not settle as a crust upon the upper echelons of the populace. No, any poor grain farmer can, should he feed his desire and apply his wisdom, take fortune for himself. The more, the better. And when men of fortune come together under great leadership, their potential is exponential. Just as my money replaced what the Orokin took from me and made my body whole again, our collective desire will create a new body. A body forged of fortune and unencumbered by idleness, or sentimentality. Ours is the grasping golden hand. We are desire. We are Corpus.
Offering his own money so that others can create their own money. And here's the important part. Themselves make deals with, of course, others in order to create capital for them as well.
People helping people is powerful stuff.
There were no servants in the original vision, at least from the tenets he had whispered to him, those he then had galvanized into reliefs that tell his story as well as his directives to others. That money begets money, but that charity is power. And maybe most importantly, fulfill desire, and others will follow. And in truth, for a time, that was the way. Parvos and Nef Anyo, each leaders of the Corpus at some point, both grew up poor. They achieved through the Corpus system. It wasn't until Anyo's generation, however, that their doctrines were perverted, something Granum himself confronts Nef Anyo on during the Deadlock Protocol.
Father, permit me to show you all I have built in your name. Do Nef Anyo that honor.
My name. I have watched you. Monuments to narcissism, demanding others sweat in your stead, gorging upon that which you have not earned. Watched as you claimed for yourself my teachings of self-reliance, perverting them into a flaccid philosophy of sloth, of idleness. Is that you, my son?
No, that must be a different son.
That he had begun making his wealth off the back of others, sitting in his own ivory tower and mimicking the Orcan, the society he himself had sacrificed so much for to get away from. A sacrifice that, had it not been made, would never have allowed the Corpus and thus Nef Anyo's path out of poverty to even exist. Capitalism, socialism, communism, they all share a similar fundamental flaw that will never be overcome. That, of course, is people. The one question one has to ask is how many people do they want to be able to wield financial and thus actual power that will inevitably affect their own life? Do they want it to be centralized into a single entity or group that makes decisions for the entirety of all they preside over, like the Orcan? Or are they more comfortable with people who are not born into the right economic castes being able to achieve and ascend higher than their birth rate would otherwise dictate, like the Corpus? In Warframe, both instances are presented, each at their logical conclusion due to the aforementioned flaw. Perhaps, and I would say it's most likely, that at one point, the Orcan founders envisioned a perfect society, one that they would govern righteously, but that didn't end up happening, and in the end, the entire solar system was inevitably forced to accept Orcan will, whether they wanted it or not. In the case of the Corpus, well, we see the perversion fester here as well, specifically within colony settlements like that of Fortuna. These people are not being given the same deals, the same ability to fulfill their own desire. They are instead dealing with extreme wealth inequality, without any of the consumerism that typically accompanies late-stage capitalism, as well as being forced to largely barter with the only things they are allowed to own, themselves. And not just like in a slave way, no. They must pay with their own body parts, many never seeing themselves or parts of themselves ever again. And it's important in the context of the Vallis Undermine and Fortuna specifically that these places, by original Corpus doctrine, were not supposed to be the way we see it. Nef, like the rest of the current Corpus, has decided profit is only for the most wealthy, with those he was supposed to empower with his wealth instead being subjected to abject poverty and further being forced into the most dangerous areas of the Vallis without a thought should there be a need Anyo deems worthy.
Don't listen to that trash, mate. Corporate just wants a little fungal remediation is all. Get in, get out, get paid. Easy credits. Right. Something messing with our gear. Sure you ain't been snacking on these mushrooms, mate? Job sure would be easier if these mushrooms weren't so mucking pretty to look at.
Watch the spores! Get back to the airlock, you muggers! Run!
What the hell is that?
Hey! Oh, for soul's sake! Who let a mucking kids out here? Hey! Get back here! Stop mucking about with our gear!
And it is here where he has yet again commissioned others to explore the Vallis Undermine. However, the Undermine is an odd development. You see, the vent used to get to Nightcap's area, it hasn't always been there. Further, this area was supposed to be sealed off ages ago, but Nef has a newly reinvigorated desire to explore and exploit what can be found in the Undermine to finish a job he originally had others start all those years ago.
Oh, you little mucker! You dumped me muck on accelerant! Smart little mucker.
No corporate. NOKKO. Noco, yeah. I'm gonna call you Noco. All this fungi, eh? I swear it's filtering the waste from the towers. You take the fungi away and Venus goes all fire and brimstone.
It has come to my attention that some Solaris are refusing work orders in the deep mines. Such insubordination will be dealt with swiftly.
No, Mr. Anyo, sir. Will not comply. I'm shutting down the elevator. Nothing more goes up, and nothing more comes down. A visitor? Noco? Oh, let me get the lights. Oh, that door there used to open to the deep mines. But Corporate and I had a bit of a labour disagreement, and it just stopped working.
Nightcap, the vendor for the Undermines, was himself just another Corpus worker, seemingly complacent and even happy, being one of those Nef would use to clear the area for certain operations he wanted to begin there after figuring out what was actually down there. That being a significant overgrowth of mushrooms amongst other fungal evolution. Something Nightcap learns has amazingly enough become beneficial, dare I say imperative, for the future of any Corpus colony trying to exist under the searing heat of the sun. The systems keeping the planet cool enough for life produce fairly toxic byproducts that, amazingly enough, are being filtered by the very undergrowth that has overtaken the area. And this might make sense given it's believed everything came from what Nef Anyo really wants. The lab that both exists and surprisingly functions down there. Bear in mind, it doesn't appear that anyone continues to work there, but it also doesn't appear to need human interaction. And here, we see all kinds of interesting things. Specimens of all varieties, terrestrial and not as much. Repeated visits to the area will allow the player to expand their mind, quite literally.
Devil's cap. Combat's about to get real messy.
By subsuming the various types of mushrooms, each providing different effects. Some helpful, some not so much, and some that just defy explanation.
I call that a no. As in, I won't go near the things. Good luck.
At least without discussing the astral plane and other things of that nature. Although it's not fully fleshed out, each of these mushrooms represents something that already exists in the game, and could insinuate that each of these were firstly aspects of another creature or thing garnered from somewhere else in the cosmos, and were brought to this lab to be amalgamated with the same mushroom-like fungus that's been curiously leaked from the lab. Someone was joining entities with the mushrooms and creating new species. For some, it's pretty obvious, based on the clues offered after gathering enough of each, like the Vomble trumpet, a species clearly created using sentient genetics that were taken from Earth after the Old War. For others, well, certain ones represent status effects, perhaps being the very first instances of them actually being created. Because remember, this lab is very old. In fact, I would say it looks much closer to the interior architecture of those we see in 1999, far more than the Corpus or even the Orkin structures that exist today. And if that is true, that could mean this lab is very old. But why then would Nef want the entirety of the area cleared? Well, I believe that, of course, is due to his nature. Nef Anyo's failures, as detailed by Parvos himself, fall solely on his complacency. One of Granum's edicts specifically warns against this kind of idleness, as he calls it.
The whisper washed over me, louder now than before. Fortune despises the idle man. Stasis is death. Always move forward.
And it's this very perversion of the Corpus existence that forced its founder to question whether or not it was still worth restructuring, worth saving, or if the rot had grown far too deep.
The system shall change. No more clutching at sunk costs, imposed ideals, hand-me-down hopes. No, we are better than that. Corpus shall know a violent restructuring, but with time enough to face the impending threat from Tau with renewed and absolute vigor. Or not. Perhaps the rot is too deep. Perhaps the father should abandon his children. Perhaps it is time for a new philosophy.
And it's this very lazy ambition that has not allowed Nef to realize the truth, that if he is successful in destroying all the growth that is accumulated, the area will no longer have its natural filtration system, and thus, over time, even if the temperature cooperates, the area will become uninhabitable once again, and thus all of what has been built above will cease to be, which one would assume would represent a significant financial loss as well as a substantial hit to his reputation and, by extension, status within the Corpus. So, either he hasn't considered this, or he has. Now, I want to stress this next part is speculation, but I consider it educated speculation based on a few very important ideas already established in-game. The first is that NOKKO is a Warframe that was just made from the area. From what we've been told up to this point, Warframes are themselves the infestation, sometimes being injected into flesh, but in the case of Nidus, it would appear that his humanoid form was born of the infestation. I suspect it may have been influenced in its design, perhaps being the first Warframe even, one the Myconans had locked away in secret until we helped them with their own Triuna and infested situation. I think what is most likely being revealed is that the infestation itself, the one that has literally covered planets in the present time, the one Vallis refers to in his treasonous messages to Hunhao.
We were forced to older means, not circuits, nor light, but flesh and disease. Our horrors past, our ravaged outer colonies became gardens. We cultured the infestation, conceiving of a hybrid.
Was originally derived from a kind of mushroom. And it's interesting because within the Hex quest, Eleanor, someone who's very attuned to the nature of the tech rod, due to it infecting her in a stronger, more aggressive manner than the others, mentions that at one point,
The Techrod's pumping out spores.
and in fact, the Hellscrubbers here are specifically designed to capture Tekrot spores. So the idea of them being available dates back as far as 1999 or even further. As mentioned, the look of the Undermine is without question dated as far as the origin system is concerned, and could be providing us additional environmental clues as to how exactly the Tekrot has found its way here, as well as why so much of it exists outside of these specific labs. Now, here's the part that is really bending my mind amidst all of this mushroom talk. What if this too is a product of Entradi's actions within Halvania, another ripple of his seemingly well-intentioned plans, changing the timeline in a negative way? Consider that, as mentioned, this hole into the Undermine does not exist in Fortuna prior to the events of the New War. However, not only is the event there after the fact, substantial fungal growth is all over the door, almost like magic mushrooms filled the area. And whether or not this is Entradi's doing may even be irrelevant at this point, as I suspect Nef Anyo no longer needs the services of Fortuna, and having to deal with Solaris United's demands should he gain control of the Undermines, because, the way I see it, what we are looking at here can be classified as biological warfare. Having versions of genetically cultivated infestation with the properties of scientific elements or even entities, all being able to be conveyed through the use of merely consuming the mushroom, means he would control the ability to take any soldier, any person, and grant them abilities just by eating a mushroom. Think of the possibilities. He would essentially be able to change the entire face of any arms race that to this day exists in the Origin system. Every element in damage, and one that could even remove the effects, making any army significantly stronger without having to purchase different ammunition types or different weapons for that matter. This, in my opinion, is the reason for the lab, the nutrient processing plant, with certain formulations already being revealed to us through Nightcap's field guide. In truth, it appears that some of the soldiers have either themselves created concoctions in some level of incorrect dose, causing them to sprout mushrooms themselves, and essentially fight against what would appear to be their squad mates, or it could be the other possibility.
Well, look at you, Noco. You ain't some leftover freak that some Orican mucker made in the lab. Don't know how or why, but somewhere along the line, you became the roots and fruits.
I should have never sent Solaris to do the job of Corpus.
Noco, they're coming. I'm blowing the mine shaft. No more coming in, no more getting out.
Just you and me now, kid. Okay, Noco. Your garden is safe. It's getting dark, Noco. I don't think I can help you much longer. Goodbye, Noco. You're trying to tell me that I, good old Nightcap, died down here ages ago? You better be careful. The prince can play tricks on you. He's a funny fella, just like Noco. But you gotta keep your head on straight. Trust me, you ain't careful, this place will turn you all sorts of funny.
It could be another possibility. Having come to value the Underminds and the Warframe child it created, first, can we say that? While it was not conceived by Warframes or even infested humans, like Nidus, it would have most certainly needed to grow to reach its current form, with Noco's evolution confirming what might appear to be a more childlike visage, sprawling, with Nightcap even greeting the little one in a very similar way. It makes me wonder if Nidus's infested brood isn't what he originally looked like at first. Now, mind you, I don't think it's the same as Soren and Jade's child, but a child, by the typical definition, they appear to be. Regardless, Nightcap has essentially come to value this place and his new friend, and decides to make his own decision regarding the fate of the area, destroying the shaft to get down and trapping himself at the same time. Now, unfortunately, it would seem the area is not properly vented, and the intake of spores, combined with a lack of breathable oxygen, causes him to peacefully pass on, having successfully saved the Underminds and essentially all those that reside on Venus. Miracles, of course, always require sacrifice. And right now you're probably thinking, was this real or some fevered dream? And that's a good question, Teshin. Do you think Nightcap's memories were altered and contained within the prince? One with a very specific tie to Noco? Or was it real? The idea of a fungal spore infecting a host and puppeting it, almost like a zombie, is unfortunately a very real thing. And in the Warframe universe, the idea of the infestation puppeting the mind of another to have them do the will of the hive mind controlling its associated aspect of the infestation, or Techrot now, is well documented and has even been demonstrated a few times already.
Alad V is sick. The infestation has infiltrated his mind. It has him doing its bidding. You're here to stop him, but in doing so, you will also be showing him mercy. The mercy of freeing him from the infestation.
So, the thought of the mind of this area, allegedly, of course, controlling Nightcap, forcing its will through him, ironically taking a Corpus and making him value something other than profit.
Profit? Profit is only a means to an end. I have evolved. I no longer need profit. I have found a purer form of growth.
What do you think? Was what we saw all some kind of hallucination? Maybe even a vision of another reality? Or is Nightcap no longer living in the conventional sense and would be better understood as a kind of zombie? Or perhaps a vessel would be the more appropriate term here. For one, interested in keeping the sanctity of the Underminds safe from harm, not only for the ones above, but for its literal own interests. Now, this is not fully confirmed either way as of now, and of course, I know what I believe. But what about you? There is, unfortunately, a darker side to all of this as well that I have as of yet mentioned, and that comes with finding a very specific mushroom, one called the No. This curious little sprout has a very distinctive calling card, as while it ominously adds void damage to weapons, it also knows when you pick it up.
I call that a no, as in I won't go near the things. Good luck.
No being 3 no's, of course, and Nightcap's description of it, where he writes,
I do not like this one. I do not know why. But every time I see it, I say the same thing. No. I've noticed that enemies afflicted with the no seem to have the unfortunate luck of attracting way more stray ordnance. If you find this one, it will be in the nutrient processing. I recommend you turn the other way. It's like this root has tapped into something I have no business understanding. Now, instead of me studying it, it is studying me. I'm the specimen, and I don't like it.
The field guide seems to suggest that not only has the void entity found its way into this area, and these mushrooms specifically, essentially putting anyone who consumes them at risk of having the glory of the void fill them up too. But perhaps more importantly, akens back to the void entity's likely corruption of the 1999 tech rod. Something that's detailed much more specifically within the Warframe 1999 ARG, and could again tie back to the idea that when aspects of the tech rot or infestation were utilized within these labs to create all the different variations of mushrooms we see, some of the specimens utilized, maybe all of them, were themselves corrupted with energies from the void, and thus the man on the wall along with it. And I think in support of all that, Nightcap seems very fearful of this planet, with good reason. But I also want to stress that a recent visit by Baroque Katir, or perhaps even his other...
Have you ever made childish bargains with yourself as the fear sets in? If I don't look, I can't be seen.
Proves quite distinctly that a fear of the void doesn't necessarily equate to being free of the void. It's just another emotion the void is potentially feeding off of, a powerful one at that, and I believe puts the infestation's behavior on Deimos prior to Whispers in the Walls, where it appeared to be showing signs of stress and anxiety, even fear, according to Latrox Un, in perhaps a different light now. One, reinforcing the idea of the infested moon literally feeding the void residing within the sanctum, making it and him stronger perpetually. To me, the story of the Vallis Undermine, while seemingly vague in its front-facing narrative surrounding NOKKO and Nightcap, is quite forthcoming in the idea that this place is not one that should have ever been found again, due to all the potential problems the implications of such low cost, seemingly easy to grow firepower could bring about, especially if every single mushroom ingested infects the host with either the infestation, the void, or both. While Nef Anyo is quite the sniveling weasel, his plan here is incredibly dangerous, and if more of the Corpus, especially Parvos, becomes involved here, the problem may exponentially increase, and given Granum's desire for all things void-related, it's a pretty good bet that, one way or another, he will find out about this and want it for his own purposes, like he did with Drusus and the Sanctum, as well as his continual efforts pillaging our own derelict Zariman, and Jade as well. And while Nef Anyo is quite manageable, Parvos will most assuredly not be so easy a mark. And what, dear viewers, do we do then? I leave that up to you. While it's still speculation, don't underestimate how the events of 1999 are beginning to sprout their way into other parts of the Warframe universe. It was speculated by most that the lyrics of Party of Your Lifetime from online were specifically about the tech rot infecting the world through their music.
Management gives us one more passive-aggressive smile. I'm gonna snap.
Further supported by how the man on the wall disguised as Entrati described the very data the Dark Sector game, in their reality of course, could infect through mere interaction. Add to that the very odd timing of this piece of information being uncovered in the ARG, and Digital Extremes subsequently offering Dark Sector in the real world for free for a limited time. That's right, for free. But I've come to realize, over the course of my many years, that nothing, and I do mean nothing, is entirely free. So I ask you, dear viewer, especially those who may have taken them up on that offer, how do you feel? And with that, there's one last thing I want to mention. While the Prince mushroom is a fairly common mushroom that is edible with a supposedly wonderful taste, I'm not sold that's what it's referring to, at least in game. In fact, the idea of the Prince, one that, as Nightcap says,
you better be careful. The Prince can play tricks on you. He's a funny fella, just like NOKKO. But you gotta keep your head on straight. Trust me, you ain't careful, this place will turn you all sorts of funny.
This idea of potentially misleading us and the information specifically coming from a child.
Feeling better, kiddo? I killed him. Isa. Did you now? Is that how you remember it? Yes. Good.
to me at least, seems to fall back in line with everything we know the Void is actively attempting to do. Another manipulation, predicated on the idea that we can't remember. So referring back to Nightcap's relevant wisdom again, when considered with the thought that the Lotus caused the Tenno's memory loss in the first place, her association with the Void, and with the visage of twin roots from the No, one large and one small, as well as our own familiarity with this very concept, specifically with not necessarily ever being sure when exactly we're ourselves or the other, a fact even confirmed by Major Rusalka. Well, I can't help but consider this as just another aspect of the grand plan the Void is bringing to fruition. After all, it is here too. And I would argue that the finger wall, as I've come to call it, signifies this very connection. Looking at it, I see a severed hand, with Entradi's eye right in the middle, fingerprints covering it, and then above, a multitude of fingerprints, with the wall itself breaking. Is this insinuating something is coming through? As I mentioned in the beginning, much of what was is being uncovered, and unfortunately, most of the things we're learning are either different from what we thought, or increasingly making the operator, and by extension the drifter, and our job much more difficult, with some of it being even a bit of both. What's maybe even more concerning is everything we thought we understood of the past is now in play. And whether we were unclear about it due to a need to keep the past buried, or our own actions within the aspects of the past, the very timeline itself, maybe all of them seem to be in danger. In Owlweaver, Nessie makes it quite clear that entropy is coming for us, but not in the natural sense. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this look into the narratives presented to us within the Vallis Undermine and its long-standing implications as well as its humble origins. Either a long-buried, elaborate bioweapons facility has been uncovered by Nef Anyo, and he looks to both continue and exploit its research while burning the surrounding area's natural overgrowth to the ground in order to isolate all of it so that only he and who he directs has access to it, all while destroying both the artificial and natural environments that have symbiotically grown together in order to facilitate the terraforming process required to allow for people to live and work in the area, and really killing all those in Fortuna. The soldiers who will inevitably be left when it all goes to hell, and even the beings who are now intrinsically tied to the Undermines, be them alive or puppeted. Where have I seen that before? Or we're just down there eating shrooms and having visions and expanding our mind, dudes. Of course, that's up for you to decide. At any rate, I hope you all have a wonderful day today, a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk at you all in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye.